it at lunchtime.
Excellent. Right. I think we're going live. So here we go. I never quite know when it's going to go live. Right, folks. So I think we're live. This is still working out our technology here. So I'm here with Paul Brooks of Retail Outside In. So retail, as in bricks and mortar, is not dead, despite the many allegations. And we're going to be talking about that today. So Paul, welcome to the live and welcome to the podcast recording as well.
Thanks, Michael. I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah, good to have a fellow North Londoner here. I'm not really a genuine Londoner, as you can tell from the accent. You sound like you're a sort of native of these shores, whereas I'm originally a Gloucestershire boy. So I'm from out in the country. But we're going to be talking about the physical location is going to have a relevance here, isn't it? Because we're actually going to be talking about bricks and mortar and e-commerce and the fact that they are a subset of the same industry, which I guess is something that we all forget in e-commerce. We think of it as just something special, and we're different and special, but of course, shops sell in physical locations and they sell online. And so be an interesting discussion. For anyone who's listening up, if you've got any comments or questions for Paul or myself, obviously Paul is the expert in this space, then do pop them in. And even if we don't get a chance to answer them now, I'll do sort of whip round if there are any missing and I'll come back to Paul, or Paul can answer them directly if we get them in the Facebook group. So if you're listening on YouTube, the Facebook group, or on LinkedIn, or possibly Twitter, I think that's where we're streaming to today, then do pop in any comments, any questions. Otherwise, I hope you enjoy the show, and we're going to record this podcast as live. So, Paul, are you ready to jump in to the podcast recording? Let's do this thing. All right, here we go.
Okay.
Okay. So if you say okay, the microphone's going to go to you. The Zoom's going to switch to you. So it's best to just leave it on me. Then we can make a clean start. All right, here we go. Ladles and jelly spoons, boys and girls, welcome to the 10K Collective podcast, the place to be for 6, 7, and 8-figure Amazon sellers. We keep broadening it to e-commerce sellers, but actually the truth is we're retailers who happen to specialize in online selling. And I say that because today's guest is Paul Brooks of Retail Outside In. And the truth is that e-commerce is a subset of retail, and most of us have kind of just thought of ourselves as rather special people in e-commerce, but of course that's not quite how it works in the real world. And so, Paul, very important message you're bringing us today. Warm welcome to the show. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm excited to be here explain and talk about retail, my favorite subject.
Excellent. So, Paul, where are you coming to us from in the world today?
I'm just outside London from a place called Northwood.
Excellent. So London, obviously a big retail destination physically, traditionally. COVID's hit hard. We're now kind of quasi maybe post-COVID in November 2021. We'll see what happens next. So interesting time to be discussing the relationship between bricks and mortar, online, and the whole retail space. So first question is Retail Outside In. Just tell us very quickly what it is you do first to give us a flavor of who's talking to us.
Yeah, so I mean, Retail Outside In, or we call it ROI even, it's an online subscription service for retailers. It offers access to retail experts to support from a like-minded community, and it gives them basically an opportunity to upskill, to prepare and to be part of what we call the retail revolution, which hopefully we're going to talk more about.
Absolutely, yeah. And I'm a big fan of being able to mix expert guidance and being part of a community of people on the same sort of journey, because we do a lot of both things here. There's the mastermind we run. We literally just had a meeting in London a couple of days ago. And then we obviously bring a lot of experts like yourself on the podcast. So it sounds like a great blend. So the first, this episode, we're going to talk about brick and mortar and online retail revolution, as you call it, or the fact that they're no longer entirely separate worlds. So why does it even matter? Isn't brick and mortar just dead, especially after COVID? Isn't it all e-commerce? Why are we even talking about this?
Yeah, I mean, I think bigger picture, it clearly isn't. It isn't dead. What's dead is the old model. So if you want to put it in a from 30,000 feet or from big picture, the way that I put it is the industrial model is dead. So the new digital model, which we have been pulled kicking and screaming to, is alive and kicking. And it's when I say the digital model could be e-commerce, it could be physical with a platform, using technology, it could be anything. Because if you think about it, and this is the easy way to understand that, whereas in the past, what I would call the customer journey was very predictable. So you'd go shopping with your mum and with your dad, or not with your dad, but with your mum. You'd go to a shop, you'd see something you'd like, and you'd buy it and take it home with you. Now, these days, a customer journey could be anything. It could start that way. You could actually go into a physical shop, see something, but then you could go back, have a look online, do some research, have a look at similar products, and then actually you might go back to the store and you might go and buy it from the store because you might want to try it on, or you might then buy it online, wait for it to come home, try it on at home, or use it at home and then send it back, or you might even use click and collect. You know, the customer journey is so unpredictable and so multifaceted that there is no sort of set customer journey. So the idea is, if you think about it as an ecosystem, you can get on or off at any place. And that is if you like, that's the dilemma of retail these days. So therefore, if someone says to me, or if I read, as I do most days, someone saying, whether it's in the press, physical retail is dead, or e-commerce is what is everything. I don't agree with that statement, because physical retail is an ecosystem, and it's where you get on and where you get off. Physical retail is just one of those places where you may get on or get off.
Interesting. Yeah, I like that. And that mirrors some of my buying behaviors. I tend to be more of an online buyer. And I guess this again comes down to the whole differentiation between customer avatars and their behaviors, right? So I'm a bloke, and I'm a typical bloke. I don't like shopping. Well, typical straight bloke, as I was going to be more precise as well. Whereas, a lot of my gay friends, some of my female friends love shopping in person. For them, shopping is a leisure activity. For me, it's something I just want to get done, which is why I love Amazon, because I go click, 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 and it's out of the way. So you're absolutely right. And then different types of products, obviously clothing, I would tend to go and shop for certain categories like shoes in person, because I happen to have awkward feet, or at least my perception in my mind is that. Whereas if you're a German who loves online shopping, you'll buy 10 different pairs of shoes and return 8 of them. I always feel very sorry for people who sell apparel in Germany, right? So yeah, you're absolutely bang on. And the interesting thing also, the hint is that the bigger players like Amazon, that's in a way, in the broader sense, you could say, is competing with Walmart, and has been for 25 years in some form, right, in the broader retail space, although it's, quotes, won the online game, at least for now. But they are opening physical stores, and they're just starting to creep into London, aren't they? I've just seen a couple down the road. So what do you think's behind? I mean, this is a bit speculative, and I know you're not necessarily, as narrowly Amazon focused as some of us are, but what's your thinking behind the big players move into physical retail, do you think?
Well, I think it says everything. I think what it says is it kind of mirrors exactly what I was saying just now, because in fact, actually, if you look at the other big, sorry to jump into something else, but it is very much connected. If you look at Alibaba, who are if you say they're the Chinese Amazon, they are huge. The Chinese market is probably 5 years in front of us at the moment in terms of retail. But if you look where they're spending all their money, they're spending all their money in physical retail. Why are they spending their money in physical retail? Because if you think about it, you made a very interesting comment about your feet. Okay, the whole point about physical retail is it's emotive. So why is it emotive? Because when you go into a store, it's 5 senses. Okay, now if you think about being online and like, as you say, shopping on Amazon is a great example. How many senses is that engaging? So it's engaging. It certainly it's 2-dimensional. Yeah. So it's engaging certainly your senses, but it's not engaging smell. It's not engaging what I would say kinetic, because although we don't know it, we get the feel of a brand when very, very quickly, when we get the 5 senses engage, we know what we like. That's how we find our loyalty. And that's what Amazon is aware of. They're aware of, they're going to catch you. They're going to catch you, all your 5 senses. But what they're going to do as well, and if you go, I don't know if you've been into the Amazon, I think it's called Fresh and Go, or they have got hairdressers that they're trialing at the moment, but their main thing is Fresh and Go. which is copying the Alibaba Hippo stores as well. What they do is they bring you in there, and obviously they engage your five senses, but they also use everywhere QR codes. And the QR codes, what they do is while the experience is an immersive experience. So if you're going to pick up an apple, for instance, that app, you hit the QR code with your phone. It's going to tell you where it was picked, when it was picked, what type of apple it is. Perhaps it might even tell you about what its credentials are in terms of its ethical credentials. All those things will capture you. Now, the other thing that it does is it mirrors the experience on Amazon. So what does it do? So for instance, we can carry on talking about our apple, but let's just say you take your apples. So, you walk into the store. As you walk into the store, automatically, it will recognize your phone, and Amazon will recognize your phone, and it will your account will come up. And as you take things off the shelf, it will register those in your shopping basket, okay? As well as you having the ability to sort of find out more information about them. Then you pack it away, you put it in the bag yourself, and then you just walk out the store and it will charge to your phone automatically. So that's doing two things. So the first thing, as I spoke about at the beginning, it's an immersive experience, and it's giving you, it's using technology, but it's appealing to what's important to people now, which is obviously knowledge and information. And then what it's doing, it's giving you the convenience, it's mirroring that experience. And it's mirroring that, the one-click experience or the convenience of Amazon. And then you're walking out, so you don't even have to spend your time at a checkout. So that's why physical is so important. But what we're doing is we're now, as I say, we're in that digital age where we're mirroring the experience that Amazon is giving you, because they are well aware that the experience online is very two-dimensional.
Very interesting. Yeah. And I suppose when you start thinking, I suppose what I've been falling into, I've realized when you were talking just now, the sort of product focused trap, which is to say, if you sell stuff online, you think in terms of e-commerce because that's all you're offering. Whereas if you are a customer, you think in terms of the customer experience, then obviously the experience is the word you keep coming back to, and the physical, differences between seeing something and scrolling and touching it and smelling it, particularly with food. I guess smell is obviously an incredibly important sense. I mean, taste, you kind of hope people aren't picking up the apples and eating them, but you could at least offer people bite-sized samples of chocolate. That's the most common thing in the world in a retail store, right? Which you can't do online. And the other thing that's striking me about my own buying habits, I'm a very kinesthetic person, I suppose, like I used to be a conductor, and I still play the piano, so I'm very hands-on, and literally some things I'd want to pick it up and feel the weight of the product rather than look at it and think that looks good. I'd want to pick it up and think, oh, that's nice and hefty, that feels solid, that feels going to last for 10 years, and that's very hard to replicate online. You have to try and do your best, but it's very, very interesting points from the experiential sort of point of view. So if we sort of zoom in a little bit more than the 60,000 foot view, like if most sellers, most people listening will be, I think nearly all will be online sellers or aspiring to be. A few might have the odd physical location, but if I'm going to start to look into setting up a physical location for myself and get a sort of bit of a taste of this, but I'm basically, I think of myself as an e-commerce seller, where do I even start with that whole journey?
Well, going back to right at the beginning when we were talking about physical retail, and we were talking about how that old model doesn't work anymore. There's lots of reasons why that doesn't work anymore, because what happens is only the strong survive, or only it's very, very difficult for independent retailers to actually have a go and actually start something. But the exciting thing about what's happened going forward now, I'm not minimizing the pain that has surrounded this, okay? Because we all know, take Debenhams, take Topshop, thousands and thousands of people have been made redundant with these big chains going bust. But the point is, if you think about I'm sorry to use this analogy, but you think about a forest fire, the forest fire's happened, or it's happening. and obviously new shoots have come. And what will come is a resurgence of independent retailers. So what I would say are typically direct-to-consumer businesses that can be given that opportunity. So then reacting and answering your question, how does that happen? Well, there are a lot of what they call, there are a lot of opportunities starting now. The market is they call them pop-up stores. Okay, so the idea of pop-up stores is the risk is minimal. So what you get the chance to, if you like, test a physical location. And why is that good? Because number one, you get your message out perhaps in a different place. So maybe you go to London and I think there's a company called Appear Here have pop-up stores. You try it out in London, so it's giving your brand also a little bit of a physical kind of opportunity out there, and of course it's giving you the opportunity to sell stuff as well, and it gives you that taste of physical retail. And then going back to what we're saying, physical retail gets those when the clients come in, they taste and feel your brand for the first time. So it's a great way of doing it because it minimizes risk. These big retailers and these models that don't work anymore, why don't they work? Because who's going to sign a 25-year lease? How are you going to afford that? As an independent retailer, you won't afford it. But then if you flip it onto the client, I don't want to be in Melbourne and go into a top shop in Melbourne and come into London and see the same stuff. I don't want that anymore. And I don't think certainly millennials and Gen Zs and I just don't think customers really want that anymore. What they want is, they don't want to be bored. They want to, if they're going to come in and physically shop, they want to see brands they haven't seen before. They want to see people. They want to see people who are going to talk to them about their exciting new brand or their new collection or their new, like you were saying, it could be anything. It could be anything new. So I think there are going to be a huge amount of opportunities for brands to do that. Now, relevant to that is we are looking at, in the very, very near future, working on what I call a phygital marketplace. What's a phygital marketplace? It's very, very similar to what I'm talking about. It's a chance to pop up, okay? So, but instead of a single store, it's within maybe 20, 30 brands in a space. So that might be curating them as health and beauty. It might be curating them as several different, so it might be menswear, women's wear, technology. And the whole point is, and I think Westminster are doing this as well, there are a lot of empty spaces out there, and there are a lot of landlords that want to give retailers that opportunity. So for instance, we will be part of a group called Neighbourhood who will bring that service. So we've got a first property that's going to open in London, probably not until after Christmas because of the risk of possible lockdown, or just to sort of make 100% sure that there's nothing happens before. If something happens before then, we're not affected. But that's where the opportunities are going to come. And I think that what we're going to see is a retail renaissance, and it's going to be led and it's going to be pushed by D2C brands that are testing in pop-up stores where the risk is being shared with a landlord or a platform to bring their goods physically to people who are coming and shopping. So what that does is will drive people again to retail, to physical retail.
A few reflections and thoughts on it, and be interested in your reactions here. The first one is, in the UK, maybe more than anywhere else whose statistics I know, I think that online as a percentage of retail reached like 37%, and it's now about 25%. That's in November 2021. And obviously, if there's another lockdown, which maybe on the cars. The government, in the typical British way, is
Yeah.
plan B, that they don't ever like to admit they're going to lock down, but based on behavior, they probably will. So you can only go by past behavior in terms of predicting future, right? But whatever it is, okay, so that says to me that the whole pitch of e-commerce has been, oh, retail's big, especially in America, and it's growing by 10% a year, and it's done that pretty steadily. But that may be true in America, which is a big old place with a lot of conservative shoppers, but Britain's a small island with digital penetration, it seems. And so almost what it seems to me is, if all I've been able to do is shop online for a year and go nuts in 2020, going to the retail physical space is almost the novel thing. The norm has become the online, and the novelty is now shifting over to retail, I think, in the UK. I mean, first of all, is this something that you think is right, or is this just kind of in my own head? It's just striking me. I don't know if it's true.
No, you're absolutely right. You know why? Because we're human beings, and our natural thing is not to sit at home on a laptop all day. Now, yes, we're on a laptop all day, but we're physical, social creatures. We need to go out and be sociable. However, big underline, big inverted commas. Now we need a good reason to go there. So what I'm trying to say is, we will want to always go shopping physically. However, as we can see from everything that's surrounded retail, you're not going to get away with it anymore. You're not going to get away with going to a white box with a sea of, denim that all looks the same. We're not going to do that anymore, because I know me, and I've spent my life in retail, and I love retail, and I love fashion, and I love going shopping, but I will not go into a store that is just, as I said, a white box full of the same thing that looks like the shop next door, full of the same thing. I always used to quote Oxford Street as a sea of denim, walking down Oxford Street looking for denim. That's just not going to happen anymore. So when people go shopping, or when they go and they want to partake in physical retail, they're going to need a good reason to do that. And then one of the sort of side things on top of that is to drive footfall. It won't just be about shopping. Again, we're human beings. There'll be a mixture of leisure. There'll be a mixture of entertainment. And when I say entertainment, I don't mean someone tap dancing and singing songs. I mean, they may be product launches. They may be local art exhibitions. There may be local artisans who are having a little bit of a trial to show their brands off. So entertainment, leisure, retail, it's not a new idea. It's, as you said right at the beginning, Michael, it's a marketplace. That's what we love, and that is why physical retail will never ever die. But what it will do is it will shed its skin, like it's shedding its skin at the moment. And what's going to be left is something extremely exciting, and something that's going to put us, the consumer, in the middle.
Yeah, I love this. Very exciting. You're making me think about it in a very different way. And as soon as you say it, this is a marketer talking to an expert. As soon as they say something, you go, oh yeah, it's kind of obvious, but I hadn't thought of that on my own, which is always great value. So a couple of thoughts. I mean, you're talking about the ecosystem and the forest fire analogy. I think one of the things to bear in mind is that, I guess, like when everyone else is fearful, it's time to be bold, and vice versa. If everyone's getting excited about property in the UK, it normally means it's time to divest, or at least not buy new stuff, right? So that's a wave. But also, if everyone's really bearish on the high street, that the fact that Debenhams has gone, that you could get yourself retail space in Oxford Street, where Cavendish House, another big British brand, or Debenhams had their physical space. Those buildings, I've cycled past them, and they're pretty much probably weren't used for a while. They may be being used for something else now. But that creates literally physically space for new brands. So it's actually a time to be very bullish on the high street, which is an interesting way of thinking about it. The other thing it strikes me is this, and related industry. And so I wouldn't say I was ever in the pop industry, but being a musician or former musician now, my wife's still a musician in London, that what happened in the record industry is fascinating, because they were like 2 decades ahead of a lot of other industries, which is at one point you could make literally millions and millions from a record. Then it got to the point where the home delivered records, if you like, or recordings were all digital as they are now. And the economics of it flipped on its head. They used to go on physical tours in order to sell the records, which is the profit center. Now they sell, Spotify downloads in order to drive people to go to the physical concerts, which is, I believe, for the right brands, now a massive profit center. So that's almost like what feels like it's happening in retail. I mean, is that how does the economics of this work? I mean, is that begins to happen in there, or is the profit center still going to be online, do you think?
No, yeah. Well, look, there's a few things there. The first thing is that there's a slight complication, because the online model has got a quirk to it that makes it not as profitable as it's always a problem, and that's returns. Okay, so if you ask any retailer that goes online, actually another reason that they like physical retail, although as we've spoken about in the past, it's been expensive, but also there is a problem with online, that there is an expense to the model, which makes it sometimes unprofitable. And you do see some of the big e-commerce players like ASOS and some of those players have gone through periods of time where the returns have actually eaten into their profits. So it's just something to, again, bear in mind when we say, is all the money going to be there? Now, what's interesting is, if you now go and look into physical retail stores, as we can see, loads of them have gone bust. Why they've gone bust? Because you're absolutely right. They're not necessarily generating their profits. I think in the future, what you will see is actually have an amazing opportunity, in a physical sense, for people to actually earn quite good money and actually charge. I know that may sound bit crazy at the moment, but if you think about, I don't know if you've been into at the moment Italy or somewhere like that. So some of these incredible, it's an amazing place by Liverpool Street Station. It's more of a food market hall, but it's an incredible place where, again, what we're talking about, you see food demonstrations, basically any Italian food, whether you want to eat it, buy it, and actually make it, is all under this one roof. There's about 40 of them around the world, but there is going to be an opportunity with physical retail to actually make money in physical ways where you actually charge people to come in. I know that sounds crazy, but that is something, and good money, and really good money. If you make the experience strong enough and immersive enough, and people will pay for it.
100%. There's always a market for things. It may just be very different drivers, right? And I think, again, to the point that you've really flagged up so strongly about the experience, it's always a good starting point, is the word customer experience. But Amazon is obsessed with customer experience, so no wonder they're at the forefront of thinking about expanding out of the online stuff into the physical area. Yeah. But what struck me about what you were just saying, I was just thinking, okay, that sounds like something, I've got a Friday night coming up, and my wife's saying to me, like, you never book anything, which is true. Typical entrepreneur, spending my life, trying to build a business obsessively. And it's, it's true. And my driver would be, oh my God, I need to do something interesting. And that's going to interest my wife. Now, suddenly the price point I'm comparing it would be with a decent restaurant meal, which in London with good wine might not be much of a change from £100 or 100 and something bucks, and depending where you go. But London, by the way, if you're listening from the States, not a cheap place to eat. Don't come here for cheap food. It's good food, international food. It's not bad food, unlike the prejudice maybe, but it's not cheap. And then suddenly my price point for an immersive experience might be like £100. Whereas if I'm going to buy something from a shop around the corner, like whatever's one called Eat, I think that they produce ready-made high-end food. Okay, it's high-end, but it's ready-made. It's not a restaurant experience. Maybe that's £10. So the price point in my mind is very different. And again, to the record industry, radio was the thing that sold records, but then so was physical concerts. And the same with football, which I know nothing about really, but and as an industry, it fascinates me. As a game, I've no interest particularly. So don't leave my channel, people, if you're listening to me. But I know it's a religion in the UK, and by say football, American listeners will mean soccer. But nevertheless, okay, so you got the television rights and those count for a lot of money. But, if they're charging 75, 80 pounds on the door, on the gates for Premiership, so $100 or euros, then suddenly the profit center shifts again, doesn't it? And I think you're right that if we are courageous enough to create an interesting experience, there's always money to be made if you're creating a premium experience and can really make it attractive to people to stick around with. It's a very interesting thought.
Absolutely. I mean, just as slightly taking it aside, I was in Paris this week. However, I just think this is quite interesting. Now, I'm not, as I said, I didn't necessarily go there to go to an exhibition, but there was an art exhibition, and I went in there because I was interested, because it was connected with technology, and it was a virtual art exhibition, pretty much like the Van Gogh exhibition, which I think is here at the moment. But I was shocked because, the price was, when you talk about price point was about where you would expect it was about 25 euros or something like that. It was mobbed, and literally it was it was Gaudi, and it was images and technology and music, and as we're talking about all these this one experience under one roof. And it just made me think, that's what we're looking for. It's not just it's families, it's millennials, Gen Zs, it's families, it's all manner of people. And I think that, going back to the question that you asked me before, that is physical retail dead? But that people are looking. We are social animals. We are not. We want that, but we are going to be very fussy about what gets us out the door now. So it's very exciting times. Very exciting times.
Excellent. Well, that really brings us neatly to talking about the services you offer, because we ought to wrap this segment up. But you mentioned neighbourhood, which it sounds like quite an intensive project you're doing. And so that's based physically in London. So tell us a little bit more about that, and if anyone wants to get involved, what they would do next.
Yeah, so we're going to be in the London area. We're waiting for that to actually come through. But what we're looking for is a lot of, so these are, just to put a sort of a line in the sand on it, there are no recognised what I would call high street retail brands that will be involved. This is all direct to consumer. This is all brands that are on Instagram, brands that are on have obviously e-commerce sites, and we see ourselves actually as a type of incubator as well, because we will be bringing unknown brands into the realm of the public and in very high profile areas in city centres, and people can get in touch with me. So anyone who's got a brand, not just fashion, but a retail brand, could be electronics, could be fashion, could be beauty, could be anything. Sportswear. We're interested in really, because it's only the pilot in London. Our plan is to roll it out to maybe 8 to 12 city centres. So if people just want to literally get in touch with me, send me an email, or which you have all our contact details. That would be very interesting. We can talk.
Sounds amazing. So just to be very clear, so that's for people who want to try and do a sort of mini launch or sort of pop-up store type thing in London. And it's going to be in city centres. So that's UK as well, I'm presuming.
Not Europe, right? Yeah, that's only UK.
Only UK, yeah, okay. But I mean, so for those who are UK based or want to kick off in the UK, where would they go to? Is this Paul at Retail Insight? Or what's the email address?
Yes, that's it. Paul at retailoutsidin.com.
Outsidin.com. Outside in, right? I'm going to make sure I get that. And the other thing is, obviously, if you're based in the States, sorry that Paul can't help you directly, but there's probably somebody with the initiative to be doing something similar. I go and look for that kind of person. If they're not, then I suppose you could be truly entrepreneurial and set it up. But you better probably know about leases and physical retail, right? It's got to be quite a skill set that you've got to bring to this, I'm guessing. So that's all very exciting. And then the other one is, of course, the retail outside in, which
Yep.
you've mentioned as your sort of training wing of stuff, really. So tell us a little bit more about what you offer there.
Well, we're if you're a retailer and you're looking for a new challenge, you either want to set up on your own or upskill for a new role. Members have access to all the events to be part of the WhatsApp community. There's a weekly Q&A, and we also have a specialist recruiter on board that can help. Experienced retailers as well. A lot of these people, a lot of experienced retailers will join Retail Outside In for the networking opportunities, with access to the recruiter as well, and access to all the masterclasses and events. We also work with the University of Westminster, so students working on there. We invite students as well, because we have mentoring. We have something that we call Friends of ROI, which is experienced. We have 6 to 8 experienced retailers who are sort of specifically friends of ROI, who can support any students who are interested, who want to come into ROI. Founders who want to sort of learn about what I call the retail revolution.
Yeah, that sounds an exciting space, and would be quite interesting to collide worlds between people who've got a lot of online marketing experience, have no experience of retail, versus somebody who's got a 30-year veteran of the physical space, and see what they cook up together, right? That's always interesting. So, and just to be clear again, is this just for UK people? Is it UK and Europe? Is it for Americans? Is it international? How does it work?
No, Retail Outside In, we've got members from Australia, we've got members from the US, we've got members from all over Europe and UK. No, it's all online.
Online, so very international. Interesting, isn't it, how it works? So you're creating physical stuff just in London, but of course you're getting an online event to talk about people who want to physically sell, but physically sell all around the world. It's funny how talking about all bets are off, as you were saying before, the sort of channels that you're working in as well when it comes to this. The way business communities work has changed as well, isn't it? Interesting.
I've been in retail for 30 years. I'm so passionate about it, because there's so much misunderstanding, as there often is with these things, because it's in the press and it sells papers, or it sells digital copies. There's so much misunderstanding. There's so much out there. I'm passionate about it, and I want people to understand that the opportunities within retail are huge. You just need a bit of vision. You need some support, and that's what we're here for.
Absolutely. So if you want to get access to that, folks, just go to amazingfba.com/retail outside in. That's retail outside in. And Paul, your passion's infectious. I can suddenly the scales are falling from my eyes. I can see lots of interesting possibilities in the area. And again, like I guess there are certain things I tend to shy away from. Dealing with factories and product development's one, and then dealing with leases and property sounds quite scary. So the fact that you're starting to make that side much easier for people to do is really exciting. And you're using your skills to enable other people to use their skills and what they do best. So exciting stuff. And just remains for me to say for this segment anyway, thank you so much, Paul, for coming on to share your wisdom about the retail revolution.
Thank you for having me, Michael. I really appreciate it. Really appreciate the opportunity.
Okay, so that's the first episode recording. If you're listening live, you'll be wondering what I'm talking about, because Paul's still here, and we're just about to talk about how to sell to brick and mortar retailers. There's a bit more of a straight quotes unquote e-commerce play, I suppose, insofar as there's such a thing these days. So Paul, are you ready to go into that? Do you need to grab a water, or are you good to keep rolling? You're equipped. You're there. Amazing. Right then, let's do. I'm just going to reintroduce you, and we'll get on to the next episode. Ladles and jelly spoons, boys and girls, welcome back to the 10K Collective podcast, the place to be for 6, 7, and 8-figure Amazon sellers, and also e-commerce sellers more broadly. Now, we are talking to today's guest, Paul Brooks of Retail Outside In, about the fact that e-commerce is a subset of retail. Newsflash, which is kind of something we intellectually know, but it's becoming a very real thing. So today, Paul, you're going to talk about how to sell to existing brick and mortar retailers if you've been developing a brand. So welcome back to the show.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
So we talked about the fact that bricks and mortar does have a future, so just to kind of quickly reiterate, with the old traditional thing, or the big screaming headlines in the papers, if anyone's still reading papers or online news sites, is physical retail is dead. So just knock that on the head for us for a second, and then let's talk about how we're going to get a part of it.
Okay, it's not. It's definitely not dead. It's definitely not dead, but it's shedding its skin. It's a retail renaissance out there. There is absolutely no doubt that the old model, call it the industrial model, is dead. And unfortunately, the numbers speak for themselves. And I don't underestimate the pain of a lot of people who are losing jobs. But just because a lot of the larger high profile retailers have left a lot of empty spaces, what that doesn't mean is us as customers don't need physical retail. And part of the new digital revolution, which of course I agree with you, e-commerce has been such a part of, it provides a platform as well where you can use technology and physical retail in conjunction together, and we also get to go shopping as well. So
Excellent.
The opportunity is there.
Excellent. Sounds great. So I guess we sort of bashfully blurred that with that message last time, but I just want to quickly say, if you didn't hear the previous episode, you should go listen, because I think there's some very interesting thoughts that Paul's opened up for us. But let's home in a bit in this episode on the basic idea. So let me give you a concrete example. I've got one of my mastermind members who's very good at product development. He and his partner sort of worked within a business. I don't know who they sold to exactly, but they were more within the product development side than selling. And they've developed really, really high-end products. And he's starting to see as an expansion of Amazon, everyone naturally tends to think, oh, I must run my own direct to consumer site, often Shopify, WooCommerce, whatever. I'm not going to get into debating the merits of those. That's too small to think that way. But a lot of people assume you have to sell directly to consumers yourself as an expansion of Amazon or other marketplaces, eBay, Walmart, etc., Etsy maybe. But what he's starting to have success with in quite a striking way with some of his brands, and some more than others, is selling directly to relatively modest size retailers. And that just reopens the whole question of, but there's still a opportunity if you've developed a product, even if you initially sold it online, that one of your expansion possibilities for the business to sell directly to people with physical retail outlets. And to your point, in that's going to be undergoing some kind of renaissance, that could be a really burgeoning opportunity, I suspect, right now at this sort of cycle of things at the end of 2021 and start 2022. So how do we start to go about that then? So let's say I've got this product, I've sold it on Amazon, it's sold really well, the feedback's great, the reviews are good, we've got the manufacturing set up, and I want to sell direct to some retailer. What do I do next?
What do you do next? Well, I think that you've got to start with the customer and work backwards, or start with the sale and work backwards. The point is that what people are looking for, I think what will underpin the renaissance, as we're talking about, are the almost the mirror image of what's happening now. So if you think that people are, that brands on Instagram and TikTok are moving forward, they're having the success at the moment. So I think that you've got to just take that and bring that into the physical market space, because you're still dealing with a human being. So I think independent things that are made locally, things that are made ethically, things that are, I think all those things you've got to think about from the customer's point of view. That's what you've got to supply. So there's got to be a large degree of flexibility. There's got to be a large degree of being able to, people aren't just buying the good. People aren't just buying when it's physical. People aren't just buying the product. They're buying the story behind it. So I think you have to have your story absolutely straight, because a lot of the stuff that happens online, yes, you do the research, you compare it, etc. Whereas when someone's in a store, someone else is selling that item, So it's a human experience. It's a sensory, 5 sensory experience. So you've got to be working on that. That's develop your story, develop your flexibility, make sure that you're thinking about who you're selling it to. You know, if you're, I always think about myself, or if it's I might think about if they're gonna sell it to my son or my daughter, I'll understand what is it that they're looking for, and
Right.
the way you shop in a physical space is different to how you shop online, because when you shop online, as I'm going back on myself a little bit, it's comparative, and it's price driven and it's research driven. Whereas when you're there on site and someone's selling it to you, it's got to have a very strong story behind it. It's all the 5 senses as opposed to 3 senses, 2 senses.
Okay, so that makes a lot of sense in terms of the retail experience. Now, if we're going to open up a pop-up shop somewhere and have, I don't know, like some, I'm just trying to think totally off the top of my head. Say you got sort of 1970s kind of swizzles, I don't know, cheese and pineapple on a stick. I don't even remember that. And you have some 70s, funk playing, and some guy in an afro and those ridiculous flares serving you, the latest kind of 70s retro style t-shirt. That I understand that would be an immersive experience that's very different. Now, what's interesting here, though, is we're talking about what I get to control as the product maker is who do I sell to, and what product is it, the price point, and the packaging, I guess, right? So I have more limited control in that scenario, right? So if it's me, for example, if I want to sell stuff, I was going to say not Topshop doesn't exist anymore, but if I wanted to sell to some chain of, smallest chain of shops that sell, I know, name a product, can't think of anything off the top of my head, Doll's clothes is a bit too specific, but whatever it is, some kind of specialist thing, like specialist cooking thing, right?
Yeah.
And there's a chain of 10 shops in London or 50 shops in Birmingham, Alabama, or wherever you happen to be based. Now, that would be too many in one place like that, but you know what I mean. How do I create something that is attractive to them? Because they've got to sell it to the end customer, but they're my immediate customer. How do I deal with that situation?
Well, the first, I've got to go back to the story again. People are selling, you've just explained. I know you're talking about what you surround it about, but people are selling when it's a physical store, they're selling an experience. So your product is part of that experience. So you have to have a very, very clear story about that product, because someone is telling that retailer, let's put it this way. If I don't know, look, here's a water bottle, yeah? You probably can't see it, but here's a water bottle. Now, one of the reasons why I bought that water bottle, because it was on a TV show. Yeah, you may know the TV show of a load of people trapped in a Marbella house for 6 weeks. I can't remember what it's called, but that has a story behind it. That's why I bought that water bottle. Now there's 1,000, 1,500, 10,000 different water bottles I could have bought. But again, I'm affected by what I see. I'm a normal human being. What I see my kids, what I see my friends, what I see. I'm still affected by the brand. So the story of buying that water bottle was very strong for me. So that's why I bought it. So
you, for example, a physical retailer, if you've got a really strong YouTube channel with a strong story around some physical products and Instagram presence and an email list of 5,000 people that love your story, I guess that would be selling a story for me. Is that the sort of thing you have in mind?
It's a lot like we discussed in our last episode, that you've got to think about physical retail as just another platform on or off in the customer journey. So it's actually the same. So social media is going to, or whatever media is involved in it, social media is going to drive people to wherever they are in that customer journey. So yes, I agree. Most of us like to go, we'll probably go online first, but who knows? You might be on the tube and you might see a QR code. You might be on YouTube and you might see it there. So you've got to treat it in the one hand as you've got to treat it as the same as you'll treat it online, offline. However, because offline is more about the experience and the physical experience, the story has to be stronger. So your packaging, your flexibility, it's just got to be that little bit stronger for physical retail.
It kind of makes sense, yeah. So I guess, as you say, that the way people shop online tends to be a bit more analytical. It's kind of comparison shopping, or Amazon is kind of one big comparison site. And people try and kid themselves when they first launched with a quotes brand, i.e. a logo they came up with after 2 glasses of wine. And, that the truth is that you're going to sell for about $1 more or less, or £1 more or less than the competitors, unless there's a strong brand, right?
I just thought something else, Michael, that's very important that I'm going to throw in there, and it's a lovely word, serendipity. Okay, now something that a lot of people, actually, I know a lady that I know a company that does it very well, but the difference between online and offline. With offline, you have discovery-based shopping. It's difficult to be. You just reminded me, because you're absolutely right. Online, it's a lot of analytical. It's a lot of comparison, data, etc. Whereas offline, of course, you go in. You've probably done a fair bit of research. You might be out on a Saturday afternoon, but you do have serendipity. You do have discovery-based shopping. Now, again, when we go back to your question about thinking about what does that product have to do, well, again, the brand's got to be, and the story's got to be strong. So it's got to be strong on the packaging. It's got to be strong on the sell to the retailer, because if you are in a store and your product is there and the customer isn't necessarily looking at the product at that moment, what's going to drive the person to discover that product? Who knows? And that's one of those things that you don't have with online shopping. You don't have discovery based. Although I do know a lady called Nia Singh, who's got a business that is producing virtual stores with discovery based shopping. She's trying to, and she's doing quite well.
It's interesting how a lot of people have worked very, very hard to try to recreate functions offline. It's the same with Zoom versus an in-person meeting, right? That kind of serendipity, the casual conversations you have with somebody in the Zoom context, or the casual browsing that you can do in person. It's just incredibly hard to recreate it digitally, right? I think Amazon does a very good job, and which we as the sellers always hate, right? The 50 million opportunities to buy everybody else's products based on buying behavior, but it's not really serendipity. It's very data driven. So as you say, that's quite different. And I guess there are certain products that strike me as actually working only in that kind of context, because if it is not keyword driven, then it's going to be hard to make it work on Amazon, or for that matter, Google and then Shopify or anything else, right? So there's certain products that don't lend themselves to online at all, which for somebody who's very e-commerce focused is a bit of a shock. But I've had a couple of clients with some things I thought, this is an interesting product. This is a thing that you should stumble across in a shop of this kind, because you ain't going to sell it on keywords. And the reason why is because for keyword A, it's overpriced, and for keyword B, it's overpriced because it combines two different things. So there's quite a few things out there, I think. Yeah. So now one of the
that reminds me just of you're the specialist in this. You'd probably be able to give me the answer, but or you'll understand it better than I will. But I'm at the moment, actually, I'm helping a company launch a beauty product, and we're putting it on Amazon. And it's very to establish that initially, and I'm sure you can help me with that. But to establish that initially, because of the algorithm, it's very difficult to start off with. Whereby, alternatively, you've got a chance of, as you say, stumbling upon it in a physical store. So that is a slight advantage. But how do you make that advantage work for you? Again, we've been through that, but it's interesting because there's barriers to entry for Amazon as well.
That's very true. So yeah. You're right. And actually, I think because it gets very familiar, but probably for most of the audience listening will be familiar with Amazon launching. And actually, just because we do it a lot doesn't mean it isn't really hard. And you're right, there is that barrier to entry, and that's called the cold start problem, I suppose, classically, which means that nobody knows you exist. And until you make sales, nobody will know you exist either. So it's what's the word? It's a positive feedback loop, and the positive in the sense of engineering strict sense.
Yeah.
So in other words, you make sales, you get ranking, you get clicks, you get sales, and thus it dries up. But to start with, to be quite honest, what a lot of people do is either manipulate the heck out of the algorithm, which is against terms of service and risky, but frankly, a lot of people do it, and or you lower your price and spend a lot of money on ad spend, which I guess is not that different to launching a new physical store. You've got to get the footfall there, and you spend a lot of money doing that. And then in order to get people to buy, to convert the shoppers to buyers, you have to offer them a great bargain. So I guess in essence, it's not that different. There are some obviously practical things you can do on Amazon which you wouldn't do in a physical store. I guess one final question I've got, we haven't left very long for such a big question, but I still have got to ask it. Coming to the point, I was giving an example of a client. It was very real because he's got so much time and money to invest. And I was saying to this particular client, not that I would say this to most people, with this particular product, what I'm seeing is the Amazon sales are steady and working well. Your direct to consumer looks beautiful, but it doesn't seem to be driving that many sales. Your business to business, in other words, selling to other retailers, physical locations, seems to be going very, very well. So if somebody is at a bit of an inflection point in their business in terms of adding another sales channel, what would you say is what drives the decision to sell to business to physical bricks and mortar retailers as opposed to going to your own direct to consumer site? What do you think is the logic in that sort of thinking there?
Well, one of the logic behind it actually is something that's happened, because whereas the retailer used to have the physical retailer used to have the power, because they had all the stores, everyone came to them. But that obviously doesn't exist anymore because the times have changed. So actually, I think it's an interesting logic where you, as long as your product has that strong story, and a strong brand, and it's good and it works, and it has a unique proposition, a strong proposition. As long as it has that, actually, I think the power's back in your hands. Interestingly enough, and I think it's going for they don't have the power anymore. So actually, you've got a good. The logic behind it is think about it, because the physical retailers I'm in contact with a lot of them in the world that I'm in. They're all struggling in terms of they're looking for new ideas. They're looking for unique products. They're looking for products that are going to satisfy, their new millennial customers and their new Gen Z aspirational customers. So actually, I would say, don't write it off. The logic behind it is, if you want me to put a name on it, is the retailers, medium, large size, actually don't have the power anymore. That's the logic behind it. So actually, the power is in your hands. And I read an interesting thing that the seasonal, if you've been in buying and if you've been in retail, you'll know that obviously it's very seasonal. But actually, that's because the retailer has controlled that. Yeah. And of course, the weather dictates in some countries, but actually in some countries it doesn't. So actually, the relationship between someone who is selling and buying, even to the fact of, we're only buying a season forward or 2 seasons forward, actually that doesn't exist anymore. So you've actually got probably a better chance than you may have previously thought. Something to think about.
That's a very good point, because I guess the traditional view of mighty things like Walmart, assuming that you view it as a physical retail store, which it primarily is. I guess Walmart.com is like a 10th the size of Amazon.com, which is big relative to most things, but not relative to Walmart's mighty retail, revenue. But especially in the UK, it strikes me actually that not only is a big percentage of retail now online, and I don't know how that stacks up compared to the rest of the world, but I do know it's a bigger percentage than US. Maybe it's similar in China, and it's very, very digitally integrated society, if you like. But Yeah, again, because the boot's now moved to the other foot, that's a very good point that I hadn't thought of. As soon as you said that, I'm like, yeah, actually, when retailers are struggling, they're more likely to strike a deal with you, to take a risk, to accept smaller unit orders, rather than saying our minimum order is $100,000 and we want 90-day terms. And then suddenly, there's a whole episode we've done on negotiating with that. We have talked about that before, but I think that's a very good point, that actually we could be much stronger placed than we think, particularly, I suspect, in the UK, which is very interesting for the UK listeners. Yeah. Listen, there's tons we could talk about here. Before we get into what you offer, we'd love to hear how you help people. What things should I have asked you about that I haven't already asked you in this area?
Well, I guess that anything, I think retail, we're just retail outside in is always connected into what's going on, what the retail revolution is bringing us. So for instance, masterclasses, we just trying to think of we have retail futurists on, we've had someone in that built someone in there who's a specialist in China retail. So make some very, very interesting listening, because as we've spoken about just briefly here, that China's 5 years ahead of the UK, ahead of the whole of Europe, in terms of where digital retail is going. So interesting. We've had people we had someone, an entrepreneur that built Harry Potter stores. So yeah, we've all of that, I think, for people going forward, it is absolutely key. I mean, that fact about turning the fact that the retailers, the large retailers, are looking for new ideas came about from me listening to one of the interviewing one of the guys from the master classes. So it's fascinating. So the idea is that we're plugged in. There's an automatic network there, because all our members are all retailers, whether it's senior retailers, founders of the DTCs. So we've got some very interesting. We're plugged in.
Yeah, that sounds very interesting. And so just to be clear, so you offer events. There's a WhatsApp community, I think, weekly Q&A. You mentioned in the previous episode you have a specialist recruiter. What does that mean? It means if you need to find somebody who can get your product retail ready, or what is it that you offer with a specialist recruiter specifically?
Well, V&C are specialist retail recruiters. So although you can go to them directly without coming into ROI, what they bring to ROI is priority. So there's a lot going on in retail. People are losing their jobs. People are looking for new jobs. They're using they're actually, there's a lot of senior people in retail, or middle market sort of people from large corporate retailers, who are actually using now, as we know, as a great opportunity to try something new in retail. And that's actually one of the things that we do. We help people, whether it's get another job with the retailer, or help them understand the opportunities that are out there for retail, because retail's not dead. Physical retail's not dead.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, like, this very, very interesting discussion, and I think it just remains for me to say that people should check out Retail Outside In. I've seen that the price points for what you're offering seem frankly very modest as well. So if you want to check it out, folks, amazingfba.com/retail outside in. And I would just say to anyone who's very, very Amazon focused, the news flashes that you've got to get off Amazon. I think we all get that. And some people are busy building their direct to consumer sites. Some people are obsessing about Etsy, and that's all well and good. But if we miss the bigger picture, what we're going to be missing is the easier wins, I think, because sometimes when you're an earlier adopter, like the fact that the high street retailers have gone from really hard to please and asking for ridiculous terms to maybe desperate for the right product. By the way, just to underscore what you said, unique, fresh, quality. Like if it's just some knockoff of something on China, it's a disaster. But so just to underscore that, I think that it's for the right kind of product. I think it's going to be great times to explore outside of the e-commerce bubble, which is really important, because most of us are stuck in it. If you've been in it, I certainly have. I mean, I don't have any physical retail experience, and many people are the same. So really important, I think, to balance that out. And Sounds like you're the man to do it. So, Paul, thank you so much for coming on to talk about this very interesting topic. Very kind of forward looking, but also I think kind of now, isn't it? The future is now, with some tagline that somebody had for some product, very good product tagline. It feels like for physical retail in the UK specifically, which I guess I have a better sense for than other countries, but not only, that sort of after Germany, they had this thing where, 1945, where everything was flattened, called Stunde Null, like was 0 hour, and everything was literally flat. So along with the Marshall Plan, it gave them opportunity to rebuild from scratch. And I think no coincidence they have the most modern, great productive factories in the world. And it kind of feels like there's a little bit of that in the high street, right? There's been a lot of wiping out of big names and a lot of opportunity that comes from the rebuild. So exciting times.
Absolutely, yeah. And there's a generation of people, like you say, who have been so creative online, on Instagram, on social media, and they're just, it's bubbling under. They're going to come into physical retail. There'll be a shared model between physical and online. Well, there actually will be no distinction between channels. It will just be another channel. But they'll come in, and there's going to be some amazing innovation. There's still going to be some bad retailers out there, but there's going to be some really good creative ideas. And I think we're going to see that again, because that industrial model was kind of ruled by, unfortunately, it was ruled by the top shops and the Debenhams, and it was boring, and it was past, and it was finished. So actually, there's what will, if I go back to my analogy of the forest fire, the shoots and what will grow will be fast, and it will be, the momentum will be ever gaining faster. So it's going to be some very, very interesting times.
Yeah, excellent. Well, thank you for bringing that to our attention. This has been very, very thought-provoking, and hopefully everyone can take something fresh from this and sort of challenge your thinking a bit. So, Paul, just remains for me to say, Paul Brooks from Retail Outside In, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you, Michael.
And that's us out for the podcast. So those listening live, thank you so much for joining us. I can see quite a few people have come with on YouTube and on Facebook as well. I guess it's easier to comment on Facebook, right? But wherever it is, we'll look out for the comments. If I miss something, forgive me. It's not because I don't love you and want to serve you, but we've on quite a few channels now. But I will scour the channels over the next few days. And if I've got comments that Paul is better qualified to talk about much of this stuff than me, of course, I'll make sure that we get Paul's input. But that's it for the live as well. So thank you so much for joining us, folks. And stay tuned to Amazing FBA and the subset of the podcast, 10K Collective podcast for 6